Hey everybody, welcome to today's Holy Week devotional. My name is Sam, and today marks Good Friday. Just before we get into this, Jesus had just finished praying for his disciples. He'd actually prayed for everybody who would ever believe in him. And after he finishes praying, he heads to an olive grove that he had frequented. And Judas, one of his disciples who had known this about Jesus, knew that this is where he went. He comes, as this is his moment to betray Jesus. He comes with torches ablaze, with Roman soldiers and temple guards to go and betray Jesus to them. He goes there, and when he shows up with these temple guards and Roman soldiers, Jesus asks him, "Who are you here to get, and who are you here to find?" And they say, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus says, "I am he." And with his words, they're blown back onto their backs. They fall down. Getting back up and gathering themselves, they go for Jesus again. And Jesus says, "I am he. Take me. Leave these other ones behind." Peter, in this moment, he draws his sword out. He slashes an ear, but Jesus says, "Put the sword away." Jesus gets bound up and is taken with Judas and these guards to the high priest. And as they get there, there's a pseudo trial of sorts. They knew what they were going to do. They had plans for Jesus. They wanted to get rid of him. And so after this back and forth happens, Jesus finally talks about being the Son of God, and they say that's enough. That's it. Let's take him to Pilate. So they take him to Pilate because, honestly, Pilate is the only one that can offer the execution, that is allowed to execute someone. And so they take him before Pilate, and Jesus goes before him, and Pilate asks Jesus, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And Jesus responds by saying, my kingdom is not a kingdom of this world. It's more than that. We get the sense from Jesus there's more to it than that. And Pilate and Jesus go back and forth, but in the end, Pilate concludes that there's no reason to get rid of it and to kill Jesus. This is not worthy of execution. So instead, Pilate orders him beaten and flogged and whipped with a lead-tipped whip, and they put a purple robe on him to mock him, and they slap him, and they put this crown of thorns on top of him. After this happens, Pilate again says that he is not deserving of death. And he says this to the Jewish crowd that's gathered with religious leaders. And he brings Jesus out in front of them with his purple robe and his crown of thorns. And as soon as they see him, they shout out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And they say to Pilate that this man Jesus has claimed to be the Son of God. This stuns Pilate. It frightens him, but they say this because this would be a reason for them to have him executed, they believe, by their laws. And then they say, "We have no king but Caesar." And for some reason, this seems to be the last straw for Pilate, and he hands Jesus over to these religious leaders. And they take him off to be crucified, to be hung on a cross between two criminals. And there they nail his hands and his feet to the cross. And he has his clothes divvied up between other people. And finally, he entrusts his mother, to his disciple John, and he asks for something to drink, and he sips from a sponge of sour wine. And finally, after he knows that his mission has been accomplished, he says, and he cries out, "It is finished." And he gives up his spirit and he dies. And they bring a spear and they pierce his side of his body, and blood and water come rushing out. And they take down his body and they wrap it in linen and they lay it in a tomb and they close it up with a large stone. It must not have felt like it to anyone else, yet it says that Jesus knew that his mission had been accomplished. He says this while draped across this cross of a tree, and it must have felt as though everything was just coming unhinged, that everything had come undone, that everything had just fallen apart. Jesus had died this horrid death. He'd been buried in a tomb. Jesus' last words, "It is finished," must have stung to his disciples. God dead on a tree. All hope lost. And yet, in this deep pit of despair, this is exactly where God knew the work had to begin and where it was accomplished. And it's where this new story was set to begin. And in this deepest pit of despair, this is where God did his most powerful, earth-shaking, history-changing work. It might be Friday. We might know today and feel and experience more than often, more than we have in years past, that today is so very much Friday in our Easter story. It might be Friday, but Sunday is coming. Sunday is coming. And Sunday we are going to celebrate. We'll have one more devotional tomorrow about the day Jesus sat in the tomb on Saturday. And then we'll have one on Monday as well. But Sunday, I am so looking forward to celebrating Easter with you.